Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 25th episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I am one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How we doing today, Tim?
Fantastic, bro. I don't know about you, but I am having a lot of fun in Mythic Plus with you as the tank, myself as the DPS, and Bubba, of course, as the healer. We smashed it last night, dude. Like, honestly, super clean runs, and I want to give a shout out to you. I don't know if you did research or what, but this is your first time tanking, and
yeah,
dude, last night was flawless. Did anyone die?
We had that boomy druid that died literally 7 times through the dungeon.
Whoa.
But I mean, there's not much you can do when they don't avoid mechanics.
Did me, you, or Bubba died? Bubba died once. I remember he did die
once, yeah.
But he's a shaman, and they could just reincarnate. So I don't know. Does it really count? I don't know. But
we still timed the key. If we time the key, it don't matter to me.
Well, yeah, I didn't know deaths don't take away time, because that booby dying, it didn't really matter, right? Because we just kept on living and just moving on. But yeah, how are you? You have fun with it? This is your first Mythic Plus experience. Are you liking it?
Yeah. I mean, I have done Mythic Plus a little bit in the past as a DPS, nothing enough to get a rating of note, but I was really stressed going into it for the first time. Literally, I remember we were running those first couple of keys, and I could feel myself physically sweating from the stress of the weight of the entire group on my shoulders. And I wasn't even as stressed about being able to do mechanics, avoid mechanics and stuff like that, just as much as I was I want to have a good idea of what packs to pull so that I am not constantly having to run back after the dungeon and do more stuff or just get everybody killed because I pulled one too many packs. So yeah, that's why I ended up doing a handful of research, at least on certain routes and stuff like that. But it's been a good time, especially now that we kind of got every dungeon down for the most part. It's just a matter of hitting it hard enough and making sure that everything gets silenced when it needs to be.
Yeah, we're 1,800. We need to be 2K for the first mount, I think. So
yes, sir.
I mean, dude, I think the next session we could get 2K.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to start pushing some 7s, 8s, stuff like that. We're going to be there in no time.
I think we got to do 10s, 11s for 3K. And they probably get pretty hard.
I have heard that they are a bit challenging, especially 10s plus. But I do think as long as we can find some more capable DPS, you obviously always doing top DPS for the most part. So as long as we can find more use.
Except for that rogue. That rogue was doing 8 million, and I just was I don't know what to do to keep up.
I can't fucking compete.
Yeah, but other than that rogue, yeah, Rhett Pally has been doing well, man. But that's been fun. Mm-hmm. That's what's been going on with probably both of us. I mean, what about you?
For the most part. Yeah, for the most part, that's what I've been up to as well. Been playing a little bit of other games, some Schedule 1 with JoJo, trying to build the world's most elaborate methamphetamine empire. And I've also been playing The Last of Us again because I love that game, and the new season just came out and got me in the itch. So I've been playing Last of Us again, and I didn't get the chance to play it on PC. And when it initially released on PC, it had so many graphical issues and stuff like that I was not willing to fork over the cash. But times have changed, at least.
Well, is it fun on PC, and does it run well?
It runs well. And it wasn't even necessarily, it didn't feel like it was poorly optimized on release, at least in terms of performance. It was just you'd constantly encounter graphical issues where somebody's face would be fucked up, or the shadows would be fucked up, or the lighting would be fucked up. And admittedly, I still did encounter one bug, but I did mess with the settings and managed to get it taken care of. But it's kind of hilarious because I originally played The Last of Us back when it came out on PlayStation 3, and I remember it being so hard. I played it on I think it was just the hard difficulty, and there was grounded, and then I think they eventually added grounded plus as well, which are the harder difficulties. And I couldn't even conceptualize playing it on a difficulty that hard when I was on a controller. Now that I'm on PC, bro, it's Headshot City, bro. The mouse and keyboard remains king.
Yeah, almost too easy, I assume.
Not quite, but because they still have mechanics in the game where as you're aiming down until you get certain upgrades, it kind of wobbles. It's not entirely laser accurate, but definitely more manageable than my incompetent thumbs on joysticks. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. I've been back to editing Tides of Lore after we took our break from a few weeks ago, and we've been, I've been having a bunch of fun with that, because also you guys have been responding so positively that like our shorts have been doing really well on YouTube, but also over on TikTok. We had like 15,000 views in the last week, so that's, huge. But yeah, that's about what I've been up to. And talking about last week, we did have an episode where we covered a lot of the lore that surrounded the Grizzly Hills. I did really want to kind of go into a nice in-depth dive for that zone specifically, just because it is so well loved and whatnot. And also there was just like a bunch of kind of backtracking that we had to do. We're also going to be doing some backtracking in this episode to come, but I do try and keep it on a linear storyline. It's just a bit difficult because like certain parts of it, like the Worgen story, doesn't really come in until Cataclysm and certain stuff like that. But I did want to bring it in just because it now has at least enough content to fill out a whole segment or something like that. So we covered a lot of history of Warcraft. We covered Grizzly Hills, and in this episode we're going to be kind of doing something similar. So I'm excited looking into that. What do you remember about last week, Tim?
Well, the Grizzly Hills, that's how we kind of related it to Wrath of the Lich King.
Mm-hmm.
The Scythe of Elune and like the creating of Worgen. I remember us talking a lot. Also, Greymane. Oh, I learned I don't like Greymane. He seems like not the most trustful leader that you could have. I think that was the big thing that we
did also discuss a little bit. Well, not a little bit. It had its own, probably like half the episode where we were discussing Wild Gods, Ursoc as well.
Also, I remember talking about Arugal. And dude, I'm playing hardcore and I'm playing my undead mage, and just like you learned about Arugal. Like there's mages that are talking about him that are fallen from Dalaran, and they're like, I can't even believe he was allowed into like the Kirin Tor and stuff like that. So it was cool. Like we talk about Arugal, and then I'm learning about him in classic WoW. It was a cool little thing. I enjoyed.
I think it's hilarious if the Kirin Tor have any sort of problems with that. I mean, let's be real here. There was Kael'thas as one of the major leaders of the Kirin Tor for a while. So clearly they don't have the best track record with background checks.
They really don't. They'll take anyone.
I mean, I guess an archdemon comes through and destroys your whole city. You probably are looking for as many recruits as you can get.
True.
But yeah, we talked about a little bit about Ursoc and his first couple of deaths, as well as his corruption from the Emerald Nightmare, and the Furbolgs trying to plant another seedling in the stump of, what's that tree called? Fuck me. Midrasil. That's the other one. We did talk about the Worgen of Book 10. Fuck it, I'm skipping it. We're just going to go to the next part. But yeah, we talked about Furbolg, we talked about Wild Gods, Ursoc, and just, most of the overall story within the Grizzly Hills. We did skip over a little bit of the stories that you might do in there. There's like kind of a smaller quest where you will help out, Harrison Jones, and interact with the Drakari a little bit, but we're going to talk more about them once we do the... Remind me what the zone above Grizzly Hills is called? Zul'Drak?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it is Zul'Drak.
Yeah, so we're going to get into them soon enough. I'm sure Bub is going to cream his pants at the concept of more troll talk, but we'll get there.
Well, don't we go in and, like, kill them all? So, I mean...
And in fairness, they basically have completely abandoned their ideology of what most trolls follow, so...
They're pretty crazy.
We'll definitely talk about that. But in this episode, or also last week, we did have a few comments that we're going to get into today. First things first, we did have... I'm going to do my best to pronounce this, because this gentleman did tell me that he was in fact French, so I'm sure that this is going to be butchered. But we did have Post Go Road Google 2389 saying, hello guys, hello team, it's been a while since I wanted to post a message here. Every time I'm listening to your podcast, I usually am sleeping, but at this time I'm painting some Warhammer figurines when I usually listen to other stuff, but here I am listening to yours while I write this down. I've been a Warcraft fan since 2005, and I'm really enjoying the stories that you've told so far. You really go into detail, and I don't feel my head turning into a hammer. So I can't wait to see your guys' channel grow. I'm sure that it will. Cheers. And I just want to say thank you. I mean, like we even said last week, like we did take a bit of a lull, but your guys' comments have been just as supportive as ever, and we do really appreciate hearing that. And I did want to kind of highlight this one because it was actually like an interesting little full circle moment for me, because I remember part of the reason that we even initially wanted to start this whole podcast and give kind of a more casual approach and more conversational approach to the lore of Warcraft was because of other podcasts about like Warhammer and stuff like that, like the 40K Warhammer Lorecast and Adeptus Ridiculous, and that's what I initially was listening to while I was working, and considering that lore from that universe is just so significantly more vast and whatnot, it does make it a lot more consumable for people like me who was just barely getting into it. And yeah, that's why we kind of even initially thought to do this podcast.
Well, it's cool because, you're teaching me, right? And then there's other people along for the ride who get to give their input. And then, we can even talk about, what they have to say. So,
indeed,
it's a cool little twist.
And
I like it.
And that's what's going to lead us right into this next comment as well, from the returning at Trace the Dawn, saying, "Here comes one of the biggest failures in WoW lore, that the game itself does not include the comics in a good way. The Nexus War is a big, massive event, but in-game it's scaled down to just a tiny quest hub. You could have had an entire dungeon in Grimbatol around the Twilight making, but it only gets worse IMO with the lore out of the game. Garrosh's trial, ? I understand that it does take time to develop everything in-game, and sometimes they don't have enough time, but I do feel like important lore shouldn't be in the comics, and the comics should only enhance the motives of the villains, heroes, and give backstory on further lore on the current and past events." And I thought that was a really good point. I do like the idea that we have more detail, like he's kind of said, like I do like the idea that we have more details being given in these stories, but it does feel a bit, I guess, even just disrespectful to the characters, because I mean there are a lot of characters in World of Warcraft that I feel like don't necessarily get the understanding from the community that they can, because I mean, first things first, most people probably don't read too much lore even while they're in game, but to then exclude a bunch of like the motives and stuff like that to just the books, it doesn't, obviously isn't going to really give people the appropriate reactions and impressions of certain characters and stuff like that as we actually move on further and further into the story.
Didn't you really like the comics too? Like, weren't they pretty badass from what you've read?
I mean, Variant Comics, the original World of Warcraft series that they did, I thought was awesome. At least, even if it wasn't like the greatest stories visually, the fact that I could, turn 3 pages and I would have this badass action sequence where I'm like, yeah, that's what a warrior feels like, where they're just ripping through a crowd of fucking dark iron dwarves nonstop. Or, a mage that is just so powerful that they do some crazy cool shit, right? I do like that a lot. And it is still difficult, though, because, I mean, obviously it's a lot easier to, I mean, even when it just comes to the books of World of Warcraft, there's a lot of stuff that I feel like gets left out that we don't necessarily get in game. Like, I feel like there should have been a moment in game where we could at least see or hear from Thrall about the death of Orgrim Doomhammer, right? But that's almost exclusively in the books.
I think they're trying to do a lot of, like, have you seen the future content for like the lore quests that they're adding? Like, as you play as Arthas.
Oh, you're talking about that stuff. Yeah, no, I did see that.
I think they're trying to add stuff like that. So they're doing like one with Xal'atath, like you get to see her either like before she was in the blade or how she got out of the blade. And then like there's one that you're going to like play as Arthas. So it's cool, dude. If they did these little events where they like, you can play as Orgrim Doomhammer or something like that, that would be cool. And I think they're considering it. It seems like it.
I mean, I think we briefly mentioned it like a few episodes back, but I personally think that if they even wanted to do a full expansion that was maybe like an infinite time ways expansion where you're constantly going to make sure that like each of these timelines is, working properly, kind of like how they do in the Caverns of Time, but instead you have like a more full leveling experience, and even these past zones or past realities of Azeroth to see these events, I think that would really help to give a lot more players a understanding of the world without as long as they don't make it contradictory to what we've already known. How the alternate Warlords of Draenor is completely different from the Draenor that we ended up, but
right.
As long as they don't do that, it shouldn't confuse people too much. It should just give information, I feel like.
Kind of off topic. I don't know if you saw, but I think they're getting licensing to make a TV show. It's happening.
Oh, it's happening? Oh.
There's a rumor, but it seems like it's happening, and people are like trying to theorize what it's going to be. Is it Arthas? What is it?
I mean, I've always said it for the Warcraft movie. They should have started on the Warcraft 3 storyline. I feel like a lot of players started there. It's the ideal storyline to dive into the lore while still giving a lot of context to future events. And then if it was successful, then you can do past events. You can do flashbacks. You can do whatever you want for that sort of stuff. But, I mean, we live in the golden age, in my opinion, of video game television with the TV series that we have nowadays. A lot of these I would have begged for as a kid, for a super awesome, League of Legends TV series like we got with Arcane, or I'm a really big fan of The Last of Us, like I just said, and I love that TV series as well, or even the lesser known ones, there's a Tomb Raider animated series that's on Netflix, and I'm pretty sure not a lot of people have watched it, but it also ties into the game. So if you've ever played any of the Square Enix Tomb Raider games, you get a lot more context for the stuff that goes on in that universe. And I thought that show was awesome as well. So I think that as long as it's a TV series and they actually give it enough time to breathe and give it enough time to explain a lot of the lore instead of cramming it into a 2-hour movie like they did, they can certainly make something amazing.
They could. And then the question is animated or live action, right? But
if you want in my opinion, not live action. It doesn't work the same. I've said this with Bub, but I think that live action loses a lot of its authenticity because we're interacting with a world that is so fantastical and so not real, that when you actually have it in an animated medium, it makes it feel significantly more. I guess you can suspend your disbelief of the storylines, of the characters, of the magic of the world when it's not entirely being tried to base in what we understand as reality, right?
True. I could go either way, honestly.
Give me that 2.5D, where they the way that they did Arcane and stuff like that, where it's 3D models done over with 2D animation over top, or 2D stylization over top. I'm telling you, perfect.
It'll be cool, but seeing the Lich King in real life, on top of Icecrown Citadel, I don't know. I would have to compare.
And I guess also the other thing is that when it comes to live action, it's so important to get the right casting and whatnot. But when it comes to doing animation, you could literally just make it look exactly like the character, bring in the same voice actor, and there you go.
True.
But yeah. That was a pretty long tangent, but yes, we did also have Stefan Altman 46 saying, I'll give you guys podcast another feedback. Your series is unique and special, and I'm always really happy if I see you guys upload another podcast. I do feel sorry for your fiance, and I hope she gets well soon. And personally, thank you so much, but we're mostly going to focus on that first little statement there of, well, that is exactly what we wanted for this series. Like we kind of mentioned in the first comment, our whole goal was to create a podcast that wasn't the same lore that, a novel can teach you and like that. Because I'm, just to be straight up, I'm never going to be Novel. Novel is way more detail-oriented. He knows every aspect of it and stuff like that. And I've always wanted this to feel more like a conversation, which is what this channel is really starting to grow into. And, I love it. But that is all that we did have for this last week. We did also... that is all that we had for this last week, and today we are going to move into a lot of really heavy-hitting topics. I know, like I said, last week was a little bit of going back in time and stuff like that, and we're going to have a little bit of that, but the events that go on in this episode are some of the most defining in Warcraft history, let alone the Wrath of the Lich King, so let's hop into that. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel and ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. So, just to hop into this episode today, we are going to discuss what are known as prismatic blades. The prismatic blades are these blades that were forged with what were called mage smiths, as well as the blessing of dragons. So, like the original ones that were created, and this was a very long time ago, before the War of the Ancients, just to be clear, that there were these blades that would be made by combining these mortal smiths and this dragon who would breathe life into these blades using their own, fire breath and whatnot, and chanting it with this energy. But also it would be like tempered and reinforced using these dragons' blood over however long. I think it says it sometimes takes thousands of years for these blades to reach completion. But the one that we are mostly talking about today is Quel'Serrar. These are one of the earliest and most revered weapons of these prismatic blades. And the reason that they are so revered is because these aren't ones that were just made with the help of a single dragon, but it was actually from the collective will of all 5 dragons. So this is before Neltharion falls, before the black dragons are considered kill on sight, and this blade was crafted with the aid of a night elf by the name of Luminarian. Luminarian is actually the man who ends up crafting the blade Fellow Malorn as well, which we have discussed pretty well in detail as well.
That's the Fire Mage artifact weapon, if I'm correct on that.
Fire Mage artifact. Yes, sir. Wielded by Kael'thas against Arthas at some point, too.
Oh, yeah. And then dropped out of ICC, right?
Kinda. I'm pretty sure the actual storyline for it when you hit Legion is that it was picked up by like a long-lost cousin of the Sunstriders, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, so there was this super powerful magical blade, basically blessed by all 5 of the Dragonflights, that was gifted to the Kaldorei by Alexstrasza, the blade Quel'Serrar. And this is one half of 2 blades, and it was entrusted to the Shendralar, which is a sect of magi who are actually from Eldrathalas, which we would just know nowadays as Dire Maul. And that's why when you originally kind of start the quest line for this blade, it was you originally needed a book from Dire Maul. But just to get into that sister blade, there was Quel'Delar. So there's Quel'Serrar and Quel'Delar, the sister blade, which is its kind of title. And it was kind of the parallel blade, forged in its own right, not the same, but it was then gifted to what would be known as the Quel'Dorei, or just the High Elves, what we would know them before their fall to being Blood Elves, right? So this blade, super awesome, super powerful, passed down from these noble bloodlines from generation to generation until it ends up in the hands of one Thalarin Dawnseeker, who is kind of just a legend in his own right. He uses it during the Troll Wars, and he fucking slaughters dudes, and he eventually will go on to hold this weapon when the Scourge arrive in Quel'Thalas, and he uses it to face them. Something interesting that I found out about this is that this character, Thalarin Dawnseeker, was not in the original version of Warcraft 3, but when they did do the reforged version, they actually do end up having him being one of the guys that is defending King Anasterion, who is trying to fight Arthas at the time, as one of the extra units that's there. And tiny touch, doesn't really, change too many things spectacularly, but these are the sorts of thing that Reforged needed to do more of. These are the sorts of things that could have given Reforged so much more life.
Is he wielding Quel'Delar in it?
He is, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So you get to see it and everything?
So I thought that was just a cool little side note, but that is, where we come into Prince Arthas Menethil marching on Quel'Thalas to face its defenders, where he will then kill Sylvanas, he'll kill Anasterion as well as Thalarin, and raise them into undeath. And hey guys, it's finally time for the episode, because we're going to talk about what they are. For the long time, I really struggled trying to explain what the difference between a Scourge and a Darkfallen and a San'layn and all that was. But we did have one of our comments from a little bit ago explain it really simply. So basically, when the Kingdom of Quel'Thalas fell, there were still these elves that were connected to the Sunwell before it had been blown up. And these ones that are resurrected are known as the Darkfallen, which is why they kind of get their title as it is instead of just being like a Forsaken or something like that, right? And these Darkfallen will end up kind of splitting into two major groups, really. One are the ones we know as the Dark Rangers, and the other ones that we would eventually come to know as the San'layn, but we'll talk about the San'layn in just a sec, because I do want to touch on the Dark Rangers. Because with the story of Arthas, we mentioned that he does go to Kalimdor to meet up with Illidan and start plotting his breakaway from the Burning Legion and stuff like that. And during that time span, Sylvanas does gain a little bit of independence where she starts to plot her betrayal of Arthas. And when she does eventually betray Arthas, she calls out to a bunch of her former banshees and a bunch of these Darkfallen that were slain at Quel'Thalas and had already served under her as her rangers when she was alive. And basically she reclaims a bunch of the loyalty from these former high elves that would go on to become what are known as the Dark Rangers. And Tim, you like Dark Rangers. You got a transmog for it, right?
I do, but I'm wondering, because you can just create a Dark Ranger. So are all the Dark Rangers that you create, they were raised how you're saying they had a connection to the Sunwell?
They still had a connection to the Sunwell, yes.
Interesting.
So I guess if you were role-playing, that would be pretty much the theory for your character, right?
Interesting. Okay. I do love Dark Rangers. I mean, red eyes, pale skin, they look sick.
They do look sick, and these Dark Rangers are what end up becoming kind of the elite operatives as well as the guards to Sylvanas Windrunner herself, who is kind of the first Dark Ranger to come to being. And with these, she goes as a Banshee with her Dark Rangers to raid Deathholm, where she'll reclaim her body and, become one of those Dark Rangers. But eventually, you do have Kael'thas leading his people to follow Illidan and learn about the Fel-based teachings that they will eventually pick up on Outland. And with those, you do have the event where Kael'thas will join up with Illidan and go to try and stop Arthas from reaching Icecrown and destroying the Frozen Throne. And during this time span, well, I mean, we already talked about it, they lose pretty hard, too. Arthas, they're doing all right, but then Arthas shows up and it is pretty much just a mollywop in Arthas' favor. And with that being the case, a bunch of these, they would be Blood Elves technically at this time. So that is, I think, where a lot of my confusion does come from. Because even one of our comments did end up mentioning where it was like, the only people who should really be able to call themselves Darkfallen are the ones that went down before the Sunwell went down. But for some reason, Blizzard did end up giving the title of Darkfallen to a bunch of these people that would die at the Frozen Throne, and also specifically the ones that were kind of abandoned. Not necessarily abandoned, but like when the Blood Elves were forced to retreat, and Illidan was forced to retreat back to Outland and stuff like that, there were a bunch of these that were left in Northrend, and Arthas just goes around basically one by one, challenging and killing all of them, and raising them into a new generation of what he will call Darkfallen, of what the story will call Darkfallen, so I'm going to refer to them as Darkfallen as well. But the most important ones of these are these ones that get raised up to basically be the brass, the leading generals, kind of lieutenants of this portion of the Scourge, the San'layn. And mainly, there is the current wielder of that blade, Quel'Delar, like we mentioned, who does eventually get tracked down by Arthas and killed, Lana'thel.
Really? Is that all you've got?
And she was like a former friend of the previous wielder, so it's not entirely clear how she gets a hold of it, and we don't really have too much information about her as a high elf either, but we do know that she was friends with Thalrin, and eventually she will take up the Blade of Quel'Delar. But, yeah, like I said, she's no match for Frostmourne. She gets struck down, and eventually he's just like, you know what? I think you'll make a really good queen for this part of the brass. So she is raised to be the queen of the San'layn, these kind of vampyric scourge. And, again, to go back to that comment that made it super simple for me, is that the way that the Blood Elves had to find another way to consume magic because they were going through mana withdrawals. So they ended up like resorting to Fel. And the San'layn do something very similar, except they draw their power from blood and life in that regard. So they are very vampyric in appearance and nature. Still not necessarily vampires 100% through, but that is where they draw their power from to feed their hunger.
What qualifies the difference from becoming raised to be Darkfallen and raised to be San'layn? Like, because they both, you said, attuned to the sun well. And does he just like choose? Or is there a specific way?
It seems like he just chooses.
Okay.
Because, I mean, even as we move down the story, it seems like they're just kind of the royalty, right? The royalty of this section of the Scourge. The rest of you are kind of regular-ass dudes that, can maybe cast spells or something like that, but the San'layn are essentially the royals, the tacticians, the agents, the ambassadors for the Scourge, and they act under basically the direct will of the Lich King. They would oversee the necropolises, they would do stuff to subvert the enemy's ranks and stuff like that, and the first one that we actually see is a figure known as Prince Tenris Mirkblood, who was sent to infiltrate Karazhan for the Lich King to observe and gather intelligence about Azeroth's magical elite. But he doesn't go undetected, so the Argent Dawn ends up sending a group of adventurers, us, into Karazhan to go handle him. And I never knew this existed in my life. Do you remember ever killing a San'layn in Karazhan?
Oh, not off the top of my head, but I don't remember everything. I only ran Karazhan in TBC a couple times.
So I kind of get conflicting reports of this guy was like kind of a one-time thing where it was like only a one-patch event where he was in Karazhan and this was happening. But I also saw something saying that he didn't get removed, so I don't know. Like I said, I didn't play Wrath like that.
Well, shouldn't have been Wrath, right? It should have been TBC. You didn't do anything in Kara and Wrath.
Apparently you did. Or at least apparently there was a secret boss added to it.
Interesting. In Wrath?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I believe patch 3.0.3 was the exact one.
Because I know they did add some cool stuff. Like, there's a guitar. Have you seen that? And I'm pretty sure that's
this
from
is the guy.
Oh, really? Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
I have heard of an event in Karazhan. Yeah, and that's where you got that
the Arcanite Ripper.
Maze. Yes, that. So wait, that's from him? Interesting.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, Miss Mirkblood. Look at that. Damn, I always wished I could get that.
Yep, obviously a reference to the Arcanite Reaper, but a fucking guitar that you can shred on and pummel your enemies. Sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought that was fucking fascinating. I'd never heard of that. I'm sure there's a bunch of people listening to this that's never heard of that, and the more you know, right?
I've always had FOMO that I've never had it, and you can't go back and get that Arcanite Ripper. It's just gone. You can get it from the black market auction house, but that's it.
Yeah, baseline 70,000 gold.
Oh, 70 million.
Yeah, if you're actually bidding for it. But that is where we're going to move on to some of the actual princes that we know about. The San'layn Prince Valinar.
See now the power of the Darkfallen!
Who ends up kind of disguising himself as the Counselor Talbot in the Alliance area in Borean Tundra, before eventually revealing himself to be a super evil dude and then ruling over the Borean Tundra from a Scourge necropolis known as the Naxxramas. We already kind of discussed this guy. His storyline is kind of the weakest out of all of them. Maybe the second weakest. We'll see when we talk about this next guy here. But yeah, he is the general that watches over this area of Northrend before the heroes of Azeroth eventually show up at his doorstep and put him 6 feet under. But then you did also have in the depths of Ahn'kahet, which we didn't go into Ahn'kahet too much during the Nerubian episode because it's kind of not too important to the lore. I mean, there are some things that have to do with the old gods in there, but we discussed most of the major plot points when we did discuss Ahn'kahet. So I did kind of skip over it a bit, but yes, there is this Prince Tal'Daram.
Tremble before Tal'Daram, mortals!
That's in there, who is also overseeing that stuff, and his whole purpose of being sent there was to siphon the energies from these ancient artifacts that the Nerubians had collected from over the years, seemingly very old god infused, right? But we show up, Red is dead, another prince in the ground. So Prince Tal'Daram is killed inside Ahn'kahet. And that is what brings us to what I consider to be the most important of these princes, Prince Keleseth.
Truth is found in death.
Who, like I said, I did also kind of mention him during that Valkyr episode. He is the one that resides within Utgard Keep. He watches over the faction of the Scourge that is controlled by the Vrykul. He works with King Yimron to coordinate the raids on the surrounding areas against the Horde, against the Alliance, against the Tonka, against anyone who's not cool with the Lich King, right? And that is what he does until the Hand of Vengeance shows up. And for those of you who don't know, the Hand of Vengeance is the section of Forsaken, specifically created by Sylvanas to go to Northrend and seek retribution against the Lich King. And they kind of have this little secret mission. The last time we kind of checked in with Sylvanas and her people, they were working on the Blight, which is this version of the plague that will kill both the living and the undead. And when they arrive there, they're kind of tasked with using this Blight in its first little kind of live test run against the Alliance if you do some of the Howling Fjord stuff as a Horde member. And they do eventually come into conflict with Prince Keleseth. So following their victory over testing this weapon on the Alliance, Keleseth shows up to them, and he's just like accompanied by some from Dragon Slayer Vrykul, and he's just like, haha, you guys suck, you'll never kill us, death to the living and all that cool stuff. And he'll kill a bunch of you dudes, he'll suck their blood, and then he'll be like, see you later. And that is when you are then sent by this portion of the Hand of Vengeance into Utgard Keep to kill Keleseth, as well as, every other person that's inside of there. Something I did want to mention, because I do have the experience in it, is that I remember the most about Prince Keleseth being that he absolutely ruined the Hearthstone meta for like an entire year. Because let me tell you, Tim, you play card games, right? You like some Pokemon, you like yourself some
I play some Pokemon. I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! No.
Okay.
But I do play Pokemon.
So, I mean, for those of you who don't know Hearthstone, it just might not make a lot of sense for you. But let me tell you, this man, his ability when you would play him on the field would be that if your deck didn't have any 2 mana costs, all cards will come from 0 to 10 mana cost. If you play him, any card in your deck, as long as you don't have a 2 mana cost card in your deck, he will give a +1/+1 buff to, which on its own seems just okay. But then you would play him on the Rogue class, which has a special ability called Shadow Step, which is a 0-cost card where you can pick up any card and reduce its mana cost. So you would pick up this card if you drew it in its very first opening hand. You would play it, you would get +1 to everyone, and then you would pick it up, and then you play it again, and it would give another +1, and you pick it up, and then you play it again. And it basically completely made playing against a rogue that had this deck and drew Keleseth early impossible. Because as great as your 3-cost card was going to be, it wasn't going to be a fucking 5/7 like the rogue was about to play.
How long did that last until it got nerfed?
It didn't get nerfed. That's the thing about Hearthstone cards, really, is they rarely actually get nerfed, and usually they just let the season roll by until they're removed to what is called the wild sets, where they just play any cards. So you have the standard, and then you have the wild. And it is what made me quit playing Hearthstone. That and the priest decks that were out at the time. I was just like, I'm never playing this game again. I can't stand this shit. But yeah, we do go into Utgard Keep. We also kill Prince Keleseth. And now, for the most part, all of these San'layn princes that we know about are dead. And I'm sure that they definitely won't come back. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Now,
but yeah,
you said they used the Blight. Did they outlaw the Blight? Is that outlawed yet by the Horde? Because of how
so they
toxic it is?
They still didn't really know about it. And the thing is that it, at least when you use it in that quest line, it seems like it doesn't kill everyone. It just kind of causes enough damage to them to the point where they had to run away. So it seemed like they were still kind of tweaking it just a little bit until we reach what we'll discuss at the end of this episode.
Right.
Yeah. So, like I said, first kind of test trial that we'll see of this. Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. Now we're going to move into some other stuff that I did want to include just because it doesn't really have any other really good place, and we've already discussed a large portion of Dragonblight's quest line in discussing the Nerubians. But we're going to go back a little bit, because we do need to talk about a major character. We don't really talk about the bronze dragons a lot. We talk about the red dragons a lot. They get up to a lot of shit. We talk about the black dragons a lot. They get up to a lot of shit. Sometimes we talk about the green dragons. They do some stuff. The blue dragons had a huge segment here with the Nexus War and everything like that. But I feel like the bronze dragons, up to this point in the story, they not doing much. But there is Chromie.
This must be the darkest timeline.
Who we, as Heroes of Azeroth, will come to know pretty well. But Chromie is this bronze dragon that we initially will meet playing World of Warcraft in the city of Anderhall. And Anderhall originally was kind of one of these first cities when Lordaeron still existed that got completely fucked up by the Scourge. So during the time of classic World of Warcraft, you'll go to Anderhall because you find out that not only have these necromancers been fucking with, obviously, necromancy, apparently lately they've been fucking with times too. So this catches the eye of the bronze dragons, who make it their whole purpose to watch out for the timelines, and we meet Chromie, who is usually appears as a tiny little gnome, but is actually a giant bronze dragon. And there's a whole story about why Chromie chooses to be a gnome. She wants herself to be appearing as the most charismatic and most, seemingly innocent in a way of the mortals that exist on Azeroth, just because her whole thing is about connecting with the mortals of Azeroth, about how she can better serve them as a bronze dragon and how the bronze dragons as a whole appeared to the mortals of Azeroth. You can read that online. It's called The Visage Day, about how she ends up choosing her visage. But back to Anderhall, you do then go in there, and she tasks you with neutralizing this lich that's been fucking with time too much, Araj the Summoner. And if I remember correctly, this is what ends up giving you the world buff save in classic World of Warcraft?
No, you get the world buff save just by doing stupid little quests, and you kill these bugs or these worms that come out of the silos. Araj the Summoner is a guy you kill for, I think, the key to Stratholme or some other type of key like that.
But basically, she tasks you with recovering these time-infused relics throughout these ruins and making sure that the timeline is eventually corrected. And that's really to kind of keep a long story short, because this isn't too important to our story, but you do really begin to associate Chromie with the Bronze Dragons more and more as time goes on, because unlike the other Dragonflights, ever since the end of the Third War, their aspect, Nosdormu,
Your time is up.
he's been missing. He got lost in the time waves. The whole storyline about how Crassus and Ronan end up going back in time to the War of the Ancients is they're following this anomaly after Nosdormu goes missing in the time waves, and that's how they, accidentally get caught up and sent back in time. But that is kind of the other point of this story. I did want to introduce Chromie because we'll talk about her more lately. But you do have Nosdormu, who, when he was very first raised up to be the aspect of time, the Titans, or the Titan Keepers rather, literally showed him the moment of his death. And they were like, this is it, so make sure that this is how it goes. And he's just like, okay, sounds good. Well, in an alternate, or at least in a future timeline, one of those two, one of these Nosdormus was like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to do all that I can to reverse this from happening. And with that being the case, he basically goes against his entire purpose, and it creates an entirely new character that we will know as Murazond.
You think this is your time? It is mine.
who is the leader of this faction of dragons that basically go against everything the bronze dragons stand for, the infinite dragonflight. And I did want to talk about them because the infinite dragonflight, they don't do too much until Cataclysm, but they did have some storylines in the Burning Crusade, as well as in Wrath of the Lich King, where you'll go into the Caverns of Time, and the bronze dragons will be like, hey guys, the time waves are getting fucked up, and we need your help to make sure that they stay all right. And you're like, okay, cool. So they'll send you to specific points in time to make sure that everything goes as it should have. The first one of these that we'll ever encounter is the escape from Durnhold Keep. Now, if you remember, Durnhold Keep is the internment camp that Thrall was kept in when he was a youngin' up until he would eventually escape and become war chief. And when you go into this dungeon, basically their whole point is to make sure Thrall never escapes. And with that being the case, the Horde never forms, and then for whatever reason, the Infinites will be happy with that because, you know, things will go bad for us if the Horde never shows up to aid us against the Burning Legion and stuff like that, right? So we're sent in there. Yes?
Their whole goal is to make it so Morazan doesn't die?
I think it's just literally to fuck up the timelines as much as possible.
Okay.
It is made
so
just significantly even more confusing with Dragonflight, but I would say that is the baseline story for the Infinites.
Okay, but they're getting led by Morazan, and he is Norse Dormu. He's just evil then. Because, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to piece it together, like why they're trying to do it.
And we'll definitely talk more about the Infinites. Like I said, they got a pretty thick story once we do reach the Cataclysm and stuff like that. But yeah, that currently is what the Infinites are up to. So we go in there, we stop the Infinites from killing Thrall, from preventing him from escaping, as well as there's like a little story with Taretha Foxton as well. But we stop that. We make sure everything goes as it should. And then we come back and we're like, hey, we did great. Nothing bad now is going to happen, right? And they're like, ooh. Actually, the Infinite Dragonflight is now fucking with the time when Medivh opens the Dark Portal. And I think this is part of the reason I find this conflict so interesting. Because I feel like most people would consider Medivh opening the Dark Portal to be a bad thing, right? Like, it feels like it leads to a lot of death. It feels like it leads to a lot of conflict and stuff like that. But again, like I said, if the Horde never comes through the Dark Portal and they never help us to defeat the Legion eventually, we're going to lose. If the Alliance of Lordaeron never forms to fight the Horde, we're going to lose.
The Horde's done a lot of things. So didn't they, like, who fought Onyxia? Was it the Horde, or actually wasn't it the Alliance who fought Onyxia?
Varian!
Yeah. But exactly, if we didn't have them, we would have died.
So we have to go, and we have to make sure that Medivh opens the Dark Portal, and you protect him while all these infinite dragons attack him, and this dungeon fucking sucks, because if you wipe, you literally restart. But you do. Eventually, you fight off these infinite dragons, and that is what brings us to this storyline of the Infinites in Wrath of the Lich King, of there is one more dungeon that gets open when you do Wrath of the Lich King, the Culling of Stratholme. And I mean, I feel less inclined to say that this one was super necessary, because I mean, how does Arthas going down this path really help us in the long run? Especially considering how much conflict even comes out of Wrath of the Lich King from everything that we do, right?
Right, so if they stop Arthas from becoming the Lich King, would that be more good?
I feel like it would be. I feel like regardless, like even if Stratholme falls to the undead, which it does anyway, even if all that stuff happens, what does Arthas becoming the Lich King benefit us as, you know, the protectors of Azeroth?
The Horde and the Alliance teamed up, I guess, to storm ICC, so maybe they didn't want the camaraderie. I don't know. Who knows?
Teamed up is relative, considering that there is a fight in ICC where you fight the Horde.
Yeah, but still, we're fighting. We're both fighting the Lich King.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But regardless, yes. So you go in, and you're tasked now by Chromie to help Arthas in ensuring that he purges Stratholme, and ensuring that these infinite dragons that show up to stop him are killed, as well as you help him to take down Mal'Ganis. And I as much as I think that it's weird and doesn't make 100% sense, I love this dungeon. And also, it's the dungeon that gave me my like first flying mount, really. When I very first got into WoW, I was sitting there on YouTube going, how do I get a flying mount? And they're like, just go do the bronze dragon. So,
and you had to do Culling of Stratholme in a specific time limit. I remember doing that when it was current content in Wrath, and it was, if you had a geared group, easy, but some people didn't know how to play the game, dude. So there's definitely times I failed.
Yeah. For me, it was cakewalk. I one-shot everything. Regardless if you one-shot everything, that dungeon still takes like 25 minutes to complete. But yeah, so that is what happens with the Caverns of Time. And we're going to see more of the Caverns of Time as we move into Cataclysm. We're going to see some other heroes of time. But we do also need to discuss the Bronze Dragon's conflict within Dragonblight, that area of Northrend, during the Wrath of the Lich King. Because during this time, there are what are known as the Dragon Shrines. And you're basically tasked with going to all of these Dragon Shrines throughout the questline in Dragonblight. And you got to help the Reds fight off some Scourge, and you got to help the Greens make sure that the Emerald Dream's not getting, fucked up. But there is the Bronze one that I do think is the most important out of these stories. Because you are sent to go there, and basically the Bronze Dragon Shrine is this just area of sand. And it's supposedly super hot, like a desert, right in the center of this icy area of Northrend. And it seems weird because, either this Bronze Dragon Shrine is from a time where the area of Northrend was a desert and once really hot, or maybe even potentially it's a future.
I remember going there in a dungeon and fighting a boss, a huge dragon.
Yep, the dungeon's definitely going to come, or this location's definitely going to come into play when we talk about Cataclysm. But this is kind of the precursor to that event. And you go there, you are helped by one of your future selves to fight off some of these infinites, as well as help the Bronze Dragons fight off some of these infinites. It says that they're fighting through time, which, again, just sounds like an awesome concept to me. And you even have another quest where you'll eventually go back as your older self and help your younger self in the timeline to fight off these infinite dragons. Timey-wimey stuff, lots of fun. But the climax of all of this Dragon Shrine talk is that you're trying to reveal who the leader of the infinites is, and you see Nosdormu. And Chromie's just like, it's just a vision. He's not the leader, but it's good to know that he's alive, because, again, he's been missing for a fucking long time now. But we do get some inclinations as the actual players that maybe Nosdormu is potentially going to be a villain in the future.
Is Chromie just in denial right now? Like, what's happening?
It does seem kind of like denial. She's just like, it must just be a vision. And then she's like, anyway, here's your cape. Get out of here. And we probably were just like, okay, cool, thanks. But that is all that we're going to talk about for the Bronze Dragons at this time. Because we do also have more stuff going on into Dragonblight with Naxxramas. We've talked about Naxxramas before. Previously, it was floating over top of the Plague Lands in the Eastern Kingdoms, and it was led by this lich known as Kel'Thuzad.
The dark void awaits you.
And at that time, you had the four horsemen led by Morgraine and stuff like that, and you would go in there, and, you probably wouldn't go in there, because apparently nobody fucking did this back in the day. And you would fight all of these undead and eventually make your way into the Lich's Chamber, where you would fight Kel'Thuzad and you would slay him. And what I found interesting is that apparently we did know that Liches can come back if they have a phylactery. And we even get a hold of Kel'Thuzad's phylactery after we do the original Naxxramas. But for one reason or another, we go and we turn it into this guy by the name of Father Igneo Montoy. But this guy is just a complete shithead. And he's like, ooh, time to betray the Argent Dawn. And he literally doesn't destroy this phylactery. And instead, he ends up taking it to Northrend, basically on a golden platter to the Lich King, being like, here's your servant. By the way, I also kind of want to be a servant. And the Lich King's like, cool, we'll see what we can do about that. Kel'Thuzad is resurrected, and Naxxramas moves over to just above Dragonblight, where you will do, Naxxramas 2.0. And that Montoy guy actually has been rewarded by being turned into another Lich. He exists in this, little, the mausoleum directly beneath Naxxramas, and he is now known as Thelzan the Duskbringer, and is also a Lich. I'm pretty sure we kill him, and then now with the war against the Lich King moving on, you make your way into this Naxxramas. And you go and you face the new Four Horsemen, now led by a man named Baron Rivendare, who you would originally encounter in Stratholme.
Yeah, undead strat.
You'll run it 240 times until you get your mount like me.
Or get it the 10th time.
Tim, your luck is obscene.
I don't know if it's actually the 10th. But I got it decently early.
Anyway, but yeah, so they are now led by him. You go in there, you kill them, and then this time you do face Kael'thas, and you manage to kill him again. But this time, even though, again, you don't like find the phylactery or anything in the game, it says that this item is destroyed off screen, basically. And he is no longer able to be resurrected. His soul actually moves on to the afterlife, where we'll definitely never see him again. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Oh, Shadowlands, what a time.
With the Borean Tundra secured, with the Howling Fjord secured, with the majority of the San'layn dealt with, and now Dragonblight secured after we take down the leadership within Naxxramas, there is basically the Horde and Alliance both kind of agree, not actually agree with each other, but they do both now look to Icecrown Citadel, which is the big, massive Saronite fortress that the Lich King himself rules from. And Icecrown itself has this big, massive wall all around it, made out of Saronite as well, which we've mentioned is a really hard stone. So they're looking for a way that they can get through this and go and face the Lich King. And that is what leads us to the Wrathgate. So the Alliance and Horde, they kind of have this truce together where they're like, we both need to assault the Wrathgate. And they have these major forward bases, and eventually the Alliance and the Horde then assault the Wrathgate, led by High Lord Bolvar Fordragon, and for the Horde, they have the Warlord Dranash Sourfang. And initially, the assault begins, the Alliance charges in, Bolvar is, ripping through all these undead soldiers with the Alliance. They are kind of actually losing, because they got these Raikou and all this Scourge monstrosities that are just weighing down on them. And that is when the Horde arrives. And I can't remember his exact quote, but he's literally like, well, are we just going to let the Alliance dogs have all the fun? Come on, let's get in there. And Dranash Sourfang rushes in on Wolfback with a bunch of the Horde and the Kor'kron. And together, the Alliance and Horde fight the Scourge at the Wrathgate. And I think, at least story-wise, this is the first time we truly see the Alliance and Horde, really, well, there was the Encourage stuff. But I think this is the first time on the field of battle we really see the Alliance and Horde fight together.
No, I remember hearing the horn, because you saw the Alliance getting smacked down a little bit, and then you hear the orc horn in the back, doo-doo, and then you hear the orcs, for the Horde. It was just, that was when, and I think this was Alliance, that's when I was starting to want to play Horde, was when I saw them come in. And of course, this is the first cinematic that you see in game in WoW, and my fucking computer was handling it like a flip book, one page at a time, dude. That's when I was like, I need a new computer, man. I need to play this game.
But yeah, like Tim just said, this is the very first cinematic that happens in World of Warcraft's actual in-game. We did have cinematics that were released for trailers and stuff like that, but this is the first time you'll really see a major cutscene in the game itself. And yes, together, the Alliance and Horde, they are fighting off the Scourge, and they defeat most of them. And Bolvar and Dranash march up to the gate, and Bolvar will say something like, Arthas, it's time for you to pay for the tragedies that you've inflicted on others. Get the fuck out here. And, well, he shows up. The gates to Wrathgate swing open one more time, and this time the Lich King himself steps forward.
Frostmourne hungers.
Raising up any of the other, I guess, people that would have died here into Scourge as well. And the battle kicks off once again. And it already kind of goes poorly because Dranosh Sourfang is just like, let it be finished. And he charges forward towards the Lich King, and his axe is shattered into pieces by Frostmourne, and he is struck down, and his soul is then drained into Frostmourne. And remember this moment, because it's really defining for another character. Just if you don't play World of Warcraft and you don't know about the lore, remember the name Sourfang. It's definitely coming back around. But it is also at this time, right after that, that we hear basically I think this quote will live on for in the memories of anyone who's played World of Warcraft. Did you think we had forgotten? Did you think we had forgiven? As the Forsaken, led by Putris, pull up on the cliff face with a bunch of catapults loaded with the Blight, now finished and ready to be used in combat. And he basically goes, well, not only am I happy because I'm about to kill the Lich King, I actually am really happy because I've always wanted to kill all of you. And he unleashes the Blight to kill the Lich King, but it also just washes across the Alliance and Horde that are there as well. And it kills tons of people. I don't know exactly where they get the numbers from this, but it said that 5,000 Alliance soldiers die in this event, and 4,000 Horde soldiers die in this event.
It's such a cool scene, man. His get up too. That was the tier set from Ulduar that Warlocks wore. That wanted me to play a Warlock. And one other thing, I was playing my mage and he's undead, so I did the starting undead quest. In literally the video intro, it says undead are in the Horde as a means to an end, and they don't truly have an allegiance to anyone. And I think this is like one of the first things like that you see that. Just connecting the dots right now, I'm like, oh my god, like literally the first intro, that is what they say about the undead.
So the Blight is unleashed on the Scourge, the Alliance, and the Horde all the same. It kills everybody, just as it was expected to. It even injures the Lich King, and he is like limping out of there. He limps back out the Wrathgate, and he's just like, we're not done here. So he doesn't quite die, but after he retreats, you do see Bolvar in the cloud of toxins just dying as he looks up to the sky, and he sees red dragons fly overhead. And they just bathe the entire area in red dragon's flame, which I'm not going to spoil because we're not going to get into this episode. But remember that red dragon's flame doesn't just kill. It also can bring life. So remember that. And it clears out this Blight from the area, but it doesn't save anybody. Pretty much everyone is dead, but we don't find the body of Bolvar. It's gone. Regardless, you are still tasked after this event as the player to go and retrieve Bolvar's shield, which you do. And eventually you take the shield to King Varian Wrynn. And Varian's pissed. You have to remember, Bolvar basically raised Anduin after Varian was kidnapped for that time. Bolvar took care of Stormwind while the Alliance was kind of in shambles while he was away, right?
He let Onyxia kind of take over, but yeah.
That is true. But this does lead into another major event. I mean, to be plain with you, the Wrathgate and this Betrayal is one of the most defining moments in World of Warcraft. It not only begins to sow distrust from the Alliance to the Horde, but even the Horde to the Forsaken. And it leads to more stuff, because back in Undercity, Sylvanas is probably just chilling. You actually do see this in the Sylvanas novel. And she basically gets word, hey, Varimathras wants to see you. That Dreadlord that we talked about that she kind of has under her service, she's like, yeah, he wants to see you in the Plague Wing of Undercity. She's like, I don't know what this is about, but okay. She hasn't heard what's happened at Wrathgate yet. So she goes there, and on her way, someone bumps into her, and they're like, drink this. And they give her a potion of stone skin. And she ends up, silently slipping a sip. And in that moment, as she arrives in the Plague Quarter, she sees those that are loyal to her hung up on meat hooks. And then, it's kind of all unveiled. Varimathras and Putris reveals, yeah, it's time for me to betray you. I've actually still always been loyal to the Legion, and I've kind of convinced a bunch of your Royal Apothecary Society to betray you as well. So they all start trying to kill Sylvanas. Because of that warning from one of her loyalists, she does manage to survive, but she is forced to retreat, and she runs away with any of the loyalists that she can to the city of Orgrimmar.
Is this the scenario in Undercity in Wrath? I'm vaguely remembering.
The battle for Undercity.
Yeah, I do remember that. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot. It's flooding back memories right now. But that was a really cool scenario.
And like I said, news of the Wrathgate will reach Stormwind, and Varian, being shattered from the death of Bolvar, seeing that the Horde is seemingly responsible, he dispatches Jaina Proudmoore to Orgrimmar and being like, you better fucking figure out why they did this, and they better have a real good reason, otherwise it's war. So Thrall summons Sylvanas to meet with him, and he's like, why the fuck would you do that? What is your problem? And she's like, it wasn't me, it was my underlings, and they betrayed me. And Jaina will arrive, and she's like, hey, Varian's preparing for war, so you better have a real good excuse for this. And she tells him, she's like, Putris and Varimathras betrayed me, and they have like this intent to claim Undercity and bring in a new era of the Legion or whatever the fuck. Basically, the Legion has promised them more rewards than I could have. So with that being the case, Jaina will go back to Stormwind and tell Varian, hey, yeah, they say that it was her underlings. She had no idea that it was going to happen. So I don't know what you want to do about that. And Varian is initially like, well, maybe it's not grounds for war, but also maybe now is the time to go and reclaim the city of Lordaeron, because again, this was a human kingdom. This is a place that he as a child went to when his kingdom was taken away. So he's like, you know what? We're going to go take the Undercity now. And the two factions both lead their own assault on Undercity now. You had Thrall, Sylvanas, and Vol'jin leading the Horde into the ruins of Lordaeron, and they end up chasing down and facing Varimathras within the throne room, which will eventually kill him, unless you played during the Wrath Classic release, in which case it was bugged for like a week and a half. And then Varian Wrynn, Jaina, and Brawl Bearmantle, hey, what's up? As well as Valeera Sanguinar, hey, what's up? Infiltrate the city through its old sewers, and they're seeking out Putris. They want revenge. And though they do catch him and they do kill him, all of the traitors are eventually dealt with, and that is when Varian comes into the throne room and has his blades drawn, and he looks to Thrall and he basically tells him, he's like, I don't trust you guys anymore, and I think the world would be better off without you in it.
Now, to be fair, the Lich King has not had anyone harm him like at all, I feel like, until like the Blight, right? Like the Blight, it actually hurt him, did it not?
Yeah, it did.
Like it hurt him pretty bad. This was the first time he was like, "Oh shit."
I mean, outside of like Illidan, before he even had the helm, this is like the first time you see an injury on the Lich King.
Exactly. So like, yeah, it was used in the complete wrong way, right? They killed the Horde, the Alliance, Scourge, but they found a weapon that they could potentially use against the Lich King.
And I actually kind of agree. What is really interesting that isn't really explored in the game itself is in the novel, Sylvanas says that if the Lich King had died at the Wrathgate, she would have considered all of the Horde and Alliance deaths absolutely worth it. Yeah. So in a way, Sylvanas kind of does agree that what Putris did was right. And even when she does send the Hand of Vengeance out to Northrend, she basically says, like, do not deploy this weapon until it's the right time. If you can kill Arthas, you take the opportunity to do it.
But I think after this point, it had to be outlawed by the Horde. I think Thrall outlawed it, but weren't they like making it behind his back?
Yeah, I mean, once you reach the Cataclysm, you have Garrosh being like, I don't want to see any fucking Blight. You better not be using that shit at all. And she's like, of course, I would, after the Wrathgate, I would never use the Blight.
And she's still making it.
Yeah. So, like I said, Varian shows up in the throne room. He confronts Thrall. And he's basically like, I'm gonna kill all of you right now. It's time to fight. And Jaina shows up. She ends up freezing both sides. And then she just goes, all right, guys, I think we should take a time to cool heads. And she teleports all of the Alliance forces out of the Undercity. And once again, I can't believe that people hate on Jaina, especially if you're a Horde, because Jaina is quite literally your savior.
Until BFA.
Yeah, well, maybe if Theramore hadn't happened, right? I mean, shit, even in BFA, she saves Bane, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Bane's kind of, who can hate Bane?
A lot of people. He's not caring. But she teleports the Alliance out of there, and though this does prevent complete open war between the Horde and the Alliance, there is that tenuous piece that existed where they were working together. It's not gone entirely. I think both sides still see clearly that the Scourge is the bigger threat, but now you will have frequent clashes in Northrend where the Horde and Alliance get into these skirmishes with each other. And Sylvanas will reclaim her throne of the Undercity. I'm honestly surprised that Thrall even gave her back the Undercity after this, but she does reclaim her control over it. But at that point, she is like, you know what? I'll do it myself. And this is where Sylvanas will then head on a Zeppelin over to Northrend to enact her revenge against the Lich King at any cost.
Did Putris die in the Undercity whole debacle?
Yeah, he's killed by the Alliance.
Okay.
So Putris is dead. The betrayal on the Wrathgate leaves this permanent scar on faction relations between the Horde and Alliance, even when we start getting into some of the stuff that we're going to discuss in next episode, where a literal old god is coming out of its rest to begin to try and take over the world. The Horde and the Alliance will refuse to work together because of what happened at the Wrathgate. And I mean, even further to discuss that, there is the Night Elves, who I feel like we don't talk about too much in this storyline, but apparently they were at some point trading with the Horde to give them resources and stuff like that, to get things that they needed. And after the Wrathgate, the Night Elves cut off any of that support that they would have given to Orgrimmar. And I think that's part of the biggest reason that leads into some of the other stuff that's going to come once we hit Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria, because the Horde then starts to begin to become jaded, or at the very least, I guess kind of insulted that the Alliance is taking this out on them. And also that we have to remember, Orgrimmar's literally in a desert, so they don't get a ton of resources. So they kind of see it as the Alliance starving them. And when another figure steps into the war chief position, it is going to definitely pick up that ideology.
Well, this goes back to everyone saying Garrosh did nothing wrong. Look, we just had a civil war in the Horde, right? The war chief, and I'm not going to spoil too much. You can cut this out if you want, but the war chief, right, is going to step down and give it to someone else. Like, he was literally given a broken Horde, a jaded Horde, a Horde that couldn't trust itself. And you wonder why he did the thing. And he thinks the Alliance is against him, right? So he's just trying to make the best that he could.
In a way. I would say that Garrosh, we're just going to go into it. Garrosh has always had the idea that we should not be friends with the Alliance, right? So this just kind of validates what he says. What he's like, they'll take any opportunity they can to attack us and whatnot. And I mean, I don't necessarily think he's wrong, but also in my mindset, like, wouldn't the one to be upset with be Sylvanas for even starting all of this? Wouldn't the ones to be to take all your anger out on be the Forsaken, not the Alliance?
Well, I think he did. I think he hated Forsaken.
You know what? That's actually a really good point, because as we do move into Cataclysm, there's a real big storyline about Sylvanas thinking that Garrosh is only using the Forsaken as cannon fodder. So
he probably was.
We'll talk about that, but that is where we're going to come to the conclusion for this episode. A huge episode today. We had the San'layn and the Bronze Dragons, and the most important thing that will live on in WoW history basically forever, the Wrathgate. And next episode, we're going to be looking into going into the Sholazar Basin and Ulduar as we discuss some more Titan versus Old God stuff. because like I mentioned a little bit ago, the old god has woken from his slumber. Well, not woken, but has begun to really make moves as he's breaking free from his prison. Did we have anything else we wanted to discuss before we end this?
He gave the people what they wanted, so thank you.
I am happy that we did discuss it. Like I said, I think it was kind of confusing because, like I said, I feel like some of these Darkfallen shouldn't even really be referred to as Darkfallen, but at the very least, we now know the distinction, and we actually will see a bit more San'layn as we do move into some Legion stuff, and as we move into some... I think there's a Heritage questline for the Blood Elves as well that you end up seeing some more San'layn. So they're not all gone, and I mean, even in that questline, they kind of question, they're like, can Vampire even truly be killed? And we'll discuss more of that as we move into like those expansions as well as Icecrown Citadel. So I'm excited for that. If you guys did make it this far, please make sure you drop us a like, a comment. I'm really interested. We discussed in the intro and some of the comments, like we had a gentleman telling us I usually listen to you guys while I fall asleep. Some other people have been like, I listen to you while I walk my dog. I listen to you while I go for my bike rides. So I'm curious, if you guys made it this far, let us know what you doing while you listen to the podcast, or you just locked in and watching my amazing slideshow that I make for you guys. Let us know. But that is all that we have for today's episode, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.